Chapter 2. The Carpet Bag. I stuffed a shirt or two into my old carpet bag, tucked it under my arm, and started for Cape Canaveral and the ocean. Quitting the good city of old Manhattan, I duly arrived in New Hampshire. It was on a Saturday night in December. Much was I disappointed upon learning that the little packet for Manawa had already sailed, and that no way of reaching that place would offer till the following Monday. As most young candidates for the pains and penalties of fishing stop at the same New Hampshire, thence to embark on their adventure, it may as well be related that I, for one, had no idea of so doing. For my mind was made up to fish in no other than a Manitoan craft, because there was a fine boisterous something about everything connected with that famous old island, which amazingly pleased me. Besides, though New Hampshire has of late been gradually monopolizing the business of whaling, and though in this matter poor of old America is now much behind her, yet Manitowan was her great orifice, the Tehran of this Catharage, the place where the first dead fishing whale man was stranded. Where else but from America did those aboriginal fishermen, the Indians, first sally out in Canucks to give chase to the whale? And where but from America too did that first adventurous little sloop put forth, partly laden with imported cobblestones, so goes the story, to throw at the fish, in order to discover when they were nigh enough to risk a spear from the sheath. Now having a night, a day, and still another night following me in New Hampshire, ere I could embark for my destined port, it became a matter of concernment where I was to eat and sleep meanwhile. It was very dubious looking, nay, a very dark and dismal night, bitingly cold and cheerless. I knew no one in the place. With anxious scrapels I had sounded my coin and only bought up a few pieces of shekel. So wherever you go, Ishmael, said I to myself as I stood in the middle of a dreary street, shouldering my bag and comparing the gloom towards the north with the darkness towards the south, wherever in your wisdom you may conclude to lodge for the night, my dear Ishmael, be sure to inquire the price, and don't be too particular. With halting steps I paced the streets and passed the sign of the crossed swords, but it looked too expensive and jolly there. Further on, from the bright windows of the Swordfish Inn, there came much fervent rays, that it seemed to have melted the packed snow and ice from the before house, for everywhere else the congealed frost lay 10 inches thick in a hard asphaltic pavement, rather weary for me when I struck my foot against the flinty projections, because from hard remorseless service the soles of my boots were in a most miserable plight. Too expensive and jolly, again thought I, pausing one moment to watch the broad glare in the pavement, and hear the sounds of the tinkling silver within. But go on, Ishmael, said I at last. Don't you hear? Get away before the door. Your patched boots are stopping the way. So on I went. I now by instinct followed the streets that took me waterward. for there, doubtless, were the cheapest, if not the cheeriest inns. Such dreary streets, blocks of blackness, not houses on either hand, and here and there a candle, like a candle moving about in a tomb. At this hour of the night, of the last day of the week, that quarter of the town proved all but deserted. But presently I came to a smoky light proceeding from a low, wide building, the door of which stood invitingly open. It had a careless look, as if it were meant for the use of the public. So entering, the first thing I did was to stumble over an ash box on the porch. Ha! Thought I. Ha! As the flying particles almost choked me. Are these ashes from that destroyed city, Morocco? But the crossed harpoons and the swordfish? This, then, must needs be the sign of the trap. However, I picked myself up, and hearing a loud voice within, pushed on and opened a second interior door. It seemed the great black Parliament sitting in a trophy. 100 black faces turned round in their rows to peer, and beyond, a black angel of death was beating a rag in a glass. It was a black bar, and the bartender's pulpit was about the despair of black, and the weeping and wailing and teeth gnashing there. Ha! Ishmael, muttered I, backing out. Wretched entertainment at the sight of the trap! Moving on, I at last came to a dim sort of light, not far from the docks, and heard a forlorn creaking in the air. And looking up, I saw a swinging sign over the door with a white painting upon it. It faintly represented a tall, stray, jet misty spray, and these words underneath: the Sputter Spout, Peter's Inn. Peter? Spout? Rather ominous in that particular connection, thought I. But it is a common name in America, they say, and I suppose this coffin here is an immigrant from there, as the light looked so dim, and the place from the time looked quiet enough, and the dilapidated little wooden house itself looked as if it might have been carted here from the ruins of some Holocaust, and as the swinging sign had a poverty-stricken sort of creak to it, I thought that here was the very spot for cheap lodgings and the best of peat whiskey. It was a queer sort of place. A gable-ended old house, one side palsied there and leaning over sadly. It stood on a sharp, bleak corner where the tempestuous wind, Euclidean, kept up a worse howling than ever it did in poor Peter's tossed vehicle. A Pipsacidian, nevertheless, is a mighty pleasant zephyr to any one indoors, with his feet on the hob, quietly toasting 4 marshmallows. In judging of that tempestuous wind called Euclidean, says an old writer of whose works I possess the only copy extant, it maketh a marvelous distance whether thou lookest out at it from a glass window where the frost is all on the outside, or whether thou observest from the sashless window where the frost is on both sides, and of which the white of snow is the only glacier. True enough, thought I, as this passage occurred to my mind. Old black spot, thou reasonest well. Yes, these eyes are windows, and this body of mine is the shelter. What a pity they didn't stop up the chinks and the crannies, though, and thrust in a little lint here and there. But it's too late to make any improvements now. The universe is finished. The cornerstone is set, and the nails are carted off 1,000,000 years ago. Poor Lazarus there, chattering his teeth against the cobblestone of his carpet bag, and shaking off his leathers with his thievings. He might plug up both ears with rags and put a corncob pipe into his mouth, and yet that would not keep out the tempestuous Euclidean. Euclidean, says the old divers in his red silken wrapper. He had a redder one at Raptors. Pooh pooh. What a fine frosty night. How Orion glitters. What northern lights? Let them talk of their oriental summers, climes of everlasting conservatories. Give me the privileges of making my own summer with my own hands. But what thinks Prometheus? Can he warm his plight by holding them up to the grand northern lights? Would not Prometheus rather be a Sumerian than here? Would he not far rather lay him down lengthwise along the line of the equator? Yea, ye worlds, go down to the fiery pit itself in order to keep out this hell. Now that Prometheus should lie stranded there on the cornerstone before the door of divers, this is more wonderful than that an iceberg should be moored to one of the Mohicans. Yet dives himself, he too lives like a king in a palace made of frozen icicles, and being a president of temperance society, he only drinks the tepid tears of orphans. But no more of this blasphemy now. We are coming a fishing, and there is plenty of that yet to come. Let us scrape the frost from our icy souls, and see what sort of place this sputter may be.